However, the ideology of Satanism has nothing to do with the worship of the Christian devil, the concept of the Christian devil. It is about pure selfishness being the highest aspiration in life. If I could encapsulate what satanic ideology is in a nutshell, it's waking up in the morning, and from the minute you wake up until the time you go to sleep that night, you aren't thinking about anything but yourself and what you could do to improve your own situation, and you never ever think about anybody else's situation. You never have any compassion for the suffering of other people in the world. You don't look at the world in a wider sense. You don't look at the injustices that are going on in the world in any kind of a wider sense. All you are doing is focused on me, all day, every day. That is Satanism. That's what Satanism is, and I'm not asking you to believe or accept that's what Satanism is. I'm telling you definitively and factually, as a former priest of this religion, that is in fact what Satanism is. Period. The end. And it doesn't make a difference whether you accept it or believe it or not. Like I've said, if you want to know about any religion, you would probably want to go to the priest of that religion and ask them about it. Well, I was a former priest of Satanism, and I'm telling you that's what the religion is. Period. Now, when you think about that, how many people in society qualify as Satanists? And out of those people, how many of them are women? And I admit just about as many are probably men, but I'm telling you this is heavily marketed and peddled to women in society, and there's a reason for that. To get the moral decay of a society going, you have to get the women's mind first. You absolutely have to get their minds first. Because largely they're the people who are quote-unquote raising children. And I say quote-unquote because the parenting in our society is a joke. It's a joke. And women want to bear children, but they don't want to raise them properly. Because they weren't raised properly. And largely neither were the men that they're associating with at all. And I'll tell you that just from my perspective. I talked about this last week. I wasn't raised properly by my parents. I wasn't raised by my parents, period. Like I said last week, my real family, the people who really truly raised me, are people I don't know personally in my life, in person. They were people who communicated through their writings and through other forms of media what real morality is about. And we have way too few quote-unquote parents doing that job. They're failing miserably at it. And that comes directly out of the mind control that most women undergo. Before the break, I was talking about how neo-feminism grew directly out of the satanic ideology. And there's no better evidence of that than the book The Satanic Witch by Anton LaVey, which I highly recommend everybody reading to understand a lot of the manipulation tactics that are really being used against men and how men are really being emasculated in this society. Controllers don't want any strong men in society because strong men are the only people who... strong, informed, and enlightened men are the only ones who are really going to wage any kind of physical resistance against tyranny of tyrannical government in society. Now, it's not to say that women would not be able to ideologically come out of their trance and understand the tyranny that's in place, but when it comes to any kind of possible necessity for physical action, certainly men are going to be more likely than not the individuals who are going to be taking that action. That's why it's so important to get men completely emasculated in society. And this whole idea of the destruction of all moral values in society starts with taking the woman's mind over. Okay, because they've been in the traditional role throughout history as the nurturer and the one who is going to instill moral values into the child, okay, by teaching them. Especially since traditionally women stayed with the child. Now with women in the workforce, there's nobody except the state schools to basically instill so-called values into the child. And what's getting instilled in those schools? Social Darwinism, the worship of money, the worship of the state. That's what's getting instilled into children. Scientism, a total left-brained so-called education, which is a total indoctrination system of 50,000 hours of compulsory schooling with the child away from both parents. When you have parents who have not been raised with moral values, and the only thing that they've been taught to value is money. That's the value system. Money. Where do you expect society to go? You expect it to become more free? You expect people to do great things in a free capacity? Expect it to go into chains. Which is exactly where it's at. And, I tell people, let's make it personal. I don't need to go to anybody else or talk about anybody else as an example. Let's talk about my own family. My own family are completely ensconced and entrenched in a satanic mindset. Every member of my family except me. Maybe with the exception of one or two others who I would consider very semi-awake and aware and not really active. But in general, the entirety of my own family are in a satanic mindset. Never focusing on anything but me, all day long, every day. The women of my family don't care about rights. They don't care about freedom. They don't care about what's going on around them. And the only thing they tell their children is go out and make enough money. The only thing that my own mother was ever concerned with is whether I was making enough money or had a quote job. That's it. No involvement in any aspect of emotional or spiritual life whatsoever. Certainly not trying to raise me to an accurate and deep understanding of morality at all. Zero. Never mentioned it. No, just go along with the program, go along with the system, follow the rules, because you have to come out on top because you have to make enough money. That's all. Physical creature comforts, yeah, sure, taken care of. As if that's all there is to the raising of a child. And you have millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people doing this, so-called raising their children like this, thinking that physical creature comforts are the only thing that a child needs met. That's it. Nothing else. So what surprise is there when we have totally inauthentic men and women in society that were never raised, that have no connection to the true self? And what I want to talk about is what women have been socially conditioned to desire, to want, because that plays a huge role in what's going on. A gigantic role. What the inauthentic, socially conditioned woman, which is the vast, overwhelming majority of most women, want the corporate, inauthentic man. That's what they desire in society. And so the corporate, inauthentic man, the ones that will go down that path and play ball with the system, most women will gravitate toward that, toward the guy who is compliant, has been emasculated by the system, by government, and is completely compliant with all the rules and regulations, because, they'll basically make their image into what their corporate masters want them to be, and then follow in and fall in line with whatever behaviors their corporate masters want from them. And most men will just do it because what most men in our society want is for women to be interested in them and paying attention to them. And that's what they're living their lives to try to accomplish. Not trying to get at the truth, not trying to understand what's going on in the world. They're chasing the inauthentic woman for the vast majority of their lives. And so they want to reinvent themselves into their corporate master's version of what a man should be. To look like they want them to look. To act like they want them to act. It's pathetic. And these aren't real men. They don't resemble real men in any way, and neither do the women who want men who are corporate doormats. And in general, that's what modern women want. They want either they want a corporate doormat that they can use as a resource, or they want a total dominator. And this all stems from either wanting to be in the position of control or wanting to be controlled. The vast, overwhelming majority, not all, there are some genuine, authentic women and genuine, authentic men left in this world, but the numbers are waning and dwindling, folks. And that's what the social engineers want. And how they put this idea into women's mind. You know, this idea of you have to get the person who's the most successful in society. You know, I have a question for listeners. I'd like to pose a question that is a social experiment I've done to try to highlight this dynamic. And folks, I realize how controversial this is. And I said it from the beginning. I'm not going to shy away from this. What I'm going to say needs to be said, and I'm going to say it anyway. Okay? It doesn't make a difference who's offended or alienated by this. If you think this paints some kind of negative light on my work, well, turn it off. Don't listen to it anymore. It doesn't make a difference. The truth remains the truth, and this is still going on. I'd like for people to call in because I have a question to pose. Somebody wants to answer an off-the-cuff question, you know, a blind question that I want to put out there to try to highlight a dynamic I want people to understand. The call-in number to join us is 800-313-9443. Once again, the call-in number, 800-313-9443. We actually have a caller on the line. I'm going to go to them in the next segment after the top of the hour because I have a question that I want to pose. And I think it will highlight this dynamic of why there's such a absolute degradation of moral values in our society and how women have largely played into that as a result of social engineering. I'm not saying men haven't either, but very much so this dynamic has targeted women. These social engineers know exactly what they're doing, folks. You know, neo-feminism constantly wants to tout the notion that, you know, the sexes aren't equally as oppressed in our culture, that our freedoms aren't being destroyed all around the board, men and women. You know, they put out this notion that everything is because of patriarchy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we don't live in a patriarchy or a matriarchy. I mean, if you believe that, you've bought into the dialectic. We live, ladies and gentlemen, in an occultocracy. That's the nature of the ruling class that generally completely dominates and controls and enslaves the rest of the population. You know, people want to call it a patriarchy, a matriarchy, this and that, a corporatocracy, an oligarchy. It's an occultocracy. Maybe people have never heard that term before. Well, you have now. It means rule by the occult. Rule by occult means. And folks, if you think the occult, the dark occult, as I refer to the twisted variation, the cult aspects of occulted knowledge being used against people as a weapon, okay? The dark occult and dark occultists are comprised by both men and women. And they're comprised by people from every culture, every walk of life, every age, you know, both sexes, and even just about every social income class. You know, people think it's only the ultra rich. No, the occultists are not all rich. You know, there's people who are involved in generational bloodline families of occultism, and they're not necessarily rich and powerful people. They're powerful when it comes to what they understand about the mind. We're not living in a patriarchy, folks. It's an occultocracy ruled by dark occultists. Most of the inauthentic women in our society want either a doormat or a dominator, you know, because, again, they're in one form of brain imbalance or another. And again, you could put the word woman in quotation marks. So, you know, maybe that'll make it a little bit more palatable. I'm not really talking about a real woman here. The inauthentic, mind-controlled woman that has nothing to do with what a real woman is at all. Zero. And unfortunately, the inauthentic woman comprises the vast majority of women in our population. Yes, that is a generalization, but it is a true generalization. The social engineers have done their job well, and they know what they're doing and they know how to do it. This is done through movies, television, magazines, media, the news. You just look through society, and I'm telling you right now, all you have out there is television watchers, folks. You got people who sit in front of that garbage device day in and day out, rotting their brain, and they think it's telling them something that resembles truth. The genuine being, the genuine human being, the genuine man, the genuine woman is not involved in any aspect of the game of control, whether on the side of being a dominator or being a doormat.